Is Britain turning into a grotesque shadow of apartheid South Africa or Nazi Germany? That's a script that Labour, led by the likes of Anneliese Dodds, seem absolutely hell-bent on writing with their Race Equality Act. Dodds, once Labour's shadow chancellor and now a standard bearer for the Identity Politics Brigade, is pushing a policy that's about as divisive as it gets. Now let's break it down. We've got solid laws already in place in Britain. The Race Relations Act of 1965, it didn't just act as a show, this is a backbone of our stand against discrimination. Yet Labour, with Dodds in the driver's seat, is peddling this new act like we're living in a bygone era of rampant racism. But what's the real story here? Is this actually about justice, or is this about rewiring Britain into a narrative that screams institutional racism? And then let's talk about the Equality Act, right? It's a well-meant piece of legislation, but it's morphed into a HR nightmare. Businesses are tiptoeing through legal minefields, scared witless of stepping wrong. So what's Labour's solution? Well, it's to throw more fuel on the fire with their Race Equality Act, a piece of legislation that's not just superfluous, but actually downright hazardous. It's not a step forward, it's a headlong plunge into a society torn apart by identity politics. But wait, because there is more. Labour's itching to introduce an ethnic pay gap. The reporting measures, that is, on top of existing gender pay gap regulations. Now, the latter is a mess. It gives us a data so crude that it's practically useless. What good is it to compare an air hostess with a pilot? Of course, the pilot is going to get paid more than the air hostess. That's just the way things work. You need the pilot a lot more than you need the air hostess. Anyone with a brain can work that one out. But it does wonders for discrimination grifters, frankly, painting Britain as a hotbed of sexism, convincing women that they're being oppressed by some mythical patriarchy. Now imagine the same, expanding the circus to include race. More red tape for businesses, more bad blood among employees will end up with stats so misleading that they could unjustly brand perfectly fair companies as racist. This could lead to the kind of wanton acts of criminality that we saw on our streets after the death of George Floyd in America, using the death of an American black man to be violent, to damage property and to tear down statues here in Britain. Now, Dippy Dodds, she's the maestro of this farce. Under her and Labour's rule, we're not just enabling a party, we're empowering an ideology obsessed with identity, one that uses division as a tool, not a tragedy. We stand at a crossroads. One leads to the Britain that we know and love, fair, sensible, united. The other is a Britain that's dismembered by woke ideology, where unity is a casualty and division rules the roost, wackery and wokery over common sense and British values. Labour is bewitched by these figures like Dodds and useful idiots like Starmer. We're actually herding not just the Labour Party, but the nation down an incredibly dangerous path, if you ask me. So I say, folks, it's high time that we stand up to this madness. This isn't a mere policy squabble. It's actually a battle for Britain's soul. Do we want a nation that champions true equality, or do we want to be mired in a swamp of division and discord? We need to rise against this kind of nasty divisiveness and reclaim Britain's true values: unity, common sense, fairness. Reject Dodds and reject Labour's divisive Race Equality Act.